Hello, welcome back to Real World Rides. I'm Sam, and today we're going to look at the rather fabulous BMW E24 6 Series. I mean, it's just a great looking car, and for me, this really is an icon of the 80s. I mean, look, it's just so handsome. Even Barney's getting all excited. And I don't really blame him, because look at it. I mean, the classic BMW shark nose front, which you don't see anymore because of obviously safety regulations have rather ended the fashion for pointy snouted cars. And then you've got the classic what's known as the Hofmeister kink on the rear C-pillar there, which is a bit of a design trademark of BMWs. And really, these are just a fantastic sports tourer. They had a 14-year production run, so they were a very long-lived car. They were made from 1976 to 1989. And they were replaced in a way by the 8 Series, which wasn't a direct replacement because it was also a huge amount more expensive, and they never really lived up to the 6 Series. Although I have to say, I do rather like the 8 Series. I've had a few, and they're also a great sort of modern classic buy. Check out the very traditional BMW kidney grills, which is how they should be in my opinion. And all the chrome work, again, which sort of disappeared really, especially to this extent. They really did love a bit of chrome in the 80s. Now, the BMW purists amongst you will have noticed these aren't the original wheels. Well, that's true. These are split rims, 17-inch, from an E39 5 Series, and I think they look the part. There's very few people who wouldn't agree. They really are a great looking set of wheels, but as standard, the 6 Series came on metric wheels and tyres, which was a bit of an experiment really. Voila, this is the metric rims, which would have been on the car originally, and they had these tyres which are called Michelin TRX GTs. Rather unusual tread pattern. You can still get these. Michelin are actually producing these still, but they're about £300 a tyre, which is about $400. So you can see why I've changed the wheels, and also these will kick you off the road in the wet pretty quickly unless you're fairly handy at the wheel. They're really dated, and to be honest, they drive a lot better on the rims you see, which have got modern tyres, modern grip, just generally much better. And check out the slightly offset rear exhaust, which is a sort of 6 Series feature. It doesn't, sort of, some people have said a bit cruelly, it looks like the exhaust hasn't been fitted quite right. I like it, I think they look really smart. And you've got the old rubber rear spoiler. Now, apart from a few very early cars, I think the very first sort of year of production, the 6 Series didn't actually have a spoiler, but virtually all the cars, especially all the surviving cars, tend to have it. And they're just a great looking shape, aren't they? Quite a bit of glass actually. By modern standards, you'll notice how tall the roof is almost, and if anything, if you Photoshop the car so the roof was a bit lower, it would probably look a bit more modern than it does. But I think I'm just nitpicking, and the number of people that sort of stop and stare at this or come over to have a chat when you pull up at a gas station says it all really. Now, the bonnet on these is a bit different to modern cars. Again, very few modern cars open this way, which makes sense really, because obviously if you're careless and you leave your bonnet open slightly, it's not going to get caught by the wind when you're travelling down the autobahn and fly off into the windscreen at a great speed. So I don't know why more modern cars don't have that. It seems pretty sensible to me. And it also gives you quite a lot more room to work on the engine bay. As you can see, it sort of lifts up out the way and gives you plenty of access. Now, this is the 635 CSI, which the majority of the E24s produced were. This has a straight 6 inline 6-cylinder engine, producing 220 horsepower. They also did an M version, which again was also like this car, a 3.5 litre straight 6. The M6 produced 286 horsepower, so slightly up on power. You'll notice this car's automatic. Now, all the M635s were manual. They were called the M6 in the States, incidentally, and the M635, I think, more or less everywhere else. The M635 is a hugely valuable car now. They're worth considerably more than even nice 635s. I've driven both. I like both. I would obviously agree the M635 is probably more thrilling, and obviously goes sideways rather well. They've all got sort of limited slip diffs, and the manual helps as well. But that doesn't really distract from the pleasure that you get from an automatic 635 like this. They're still a lovely car to drive. You know, they'll keep up quite happily with modern traffic. You know, they'll still do 100 miles an hour plus all day long. And I'd quite happily hop in this tomorrow and drive to the south of France without any worries whatsoever. And they're really quite a sort of untidy engine by modern standards. You know, there's nothing hidden under a cover. You know, it's all on show. You've got the idle sort of control valve just sticking up on the top there, all the fans exposed and all the various washer bottles and everything else. You've got all the build plates and Delphin metallic, which is the colour code. So this is Dolphin Grey, this car, which you can probably guess why. And you also got 2 washer bottles. So this is an intensive washer bottle, and this is a normal washer bottle. And the idea is you put a weaker mix of just either water or sort of weak screen wash in there, and you put pure screen wash in that one. And you can control it obviously from the wiper stalk, and obviously if your windscreen's covered in bugs, it will make use of the more powerful concentration, which is quite clever. And to shut the bonnet on these, you just drop it down gently, but you don't slam it. That's rather uncouth for your expensive Grand Tourer. So you just drop it down, and then you push the lever back into position, and it just, there you go, shuts the bonnet. So just quite a nice little touch really, especially for a car this age. And as you can see, before I shut the interior again, this has the sports seats, so you get nice grippy sports seats with good sized bolsters. And again, because this is the High Line, which was called the L6 in the States, you've got multiple adjustments on the electric seats there, so you can do everything. You can even do the headrest. And the nice thing about this car is everything works. So you've got nice air, ice cold aircon and cruise control, electric seats. As I say, that's why I really love sort of modern classics of the 80s and 90s, because they've still got all the features you want from a modern car. And if you start going back to cars from the 60s, which, they're obviously a different proposition, but you're sort of missing a lot of the creature comforts you've sort of come to take for granted now. Well, shall we have a quick look at the trunk? Or as us in the United Kingdom would say, the boot. Ah yes, the classic 80s BMW boot. So those not in the know, virtually all the 80s BMWs and into the 90s actually, usually had a toolkit on the inside of the trunk lid, which is rather neat. And this is a particularly nice toolkit. Have a look. So you've got a whole set of spanners, just in case you want to take your engine out at the side of the road. Screwdrivers, towing eye, and you even get a rather natty BMW duster, just in case you want to start doing any housework while you're out and about. Visiting friends or whatever, just need to polish their kitchen table or whatever. BMW have you covered. You also get a first aid kit. Again, very German this. As you can see, I can't even get it out. Let me see if I can try again with it, destroying my boot. Made in West Germany. Now, I was going to say the good old days, but that doesn't really sound quite right. So yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Made in Germany. So you get all these bandages and band-aids and Holthaus Medical. Sounds very, very formal. You expect a stern German doctor to come out and administer your medication while you're at the side of the road, stricken after an accident. But yeah, no, the boot actually, in all seriousness, is quite a good size. you get plenty of room. Don't worry about the first aid kit, I'll put that back later. Again, typical BMW quality, shuts with a nice reassuring thud. So moving on to the interior. Just before I show you the interior, I must point out the lovely chrome door handles, which are sort of solid metal. Got a nice solid feel to them. And check out all the more, I don't know if this has aluminium or stainless steel, but look at the door entry strips. Now, this car is a 1989, so this is from the very last year of production, and this is called a Highline. Now, the Highline benefited from lots of goodies over the standard car. You got colour-coded door mirrors, and probably the best thing about them is you've got virtually everything inside is trimmed in leather. The doors, obviously the seats, the dashboard, even the roof lining is trimmed in full leather. I think, from my memory serves me correctly, I think they used 17 cows gave up their lives for this vehicle, just this vehicle. Yep, that's right, 17 cow hides were used on every Highline. So there you go. If you're a member of PETA or anti-leather, don't blame me, it's not my fault. But yes, quite labour intensive on the old cow front. However, they've done a good job. They have resulted in a lovely interior. You've even got 2 seats in the back, which would be extremely comfortable if you didn't have any legs or head, because there's virtually no headroom in the back and no legroom either. But if you're an amputee, am I allowed to say that? Sorry, no offence, but you get the point. Really, back seats sort of kind of pointless unless. You can't even stick your child in the back because obviously they've all got to wear car seats now. So there you go, just a really, really smart interior. I'll show you some of the gadgets now. So this is the onboard computer of the 1980s. Not really that much high tech by today's standards, but at the time it seemed pretty good stuff. So you've got all these warnings here for your brake lights and your engine oil, coolant. So the idea is, I can only show you the brake lights one. When you turn the ignition on, you'll see the brake lights come up. That's really just to say to test them. So if I now brake, you'll see it goes off. So if any one of these has a problem, one of these lights will come on. And because they're all working by bulbs, they're just little bulbs behind there. You press that and just check they're all working, which they are. So there you go, if you've got a problem. And you've also got another computer over here, which tells you various things. Outside temperature, you can see it's rather pleasant late afternoon here in the UK. Remaining distance to empty, which goes down pretty quickly because these aren't the best cars for fuel efficiency. Average fuel consumption, time, average speed. As I say, for a car this age, this is not bad stuff. Even this car, which is the very last of them, is still 30 years old. And check out the anti-theft technology as well. That little code button allows you to set a number, so you can program in a number from 0 to 9,999, and you have to input that code when you get back in the car and restart it, and without that it won't start. So quite a good little anti-theft device, because I imagine these were pretty easy to hotwire by modern standards. And have a look at the dash cluster. These are really the typical BMW instruments. For a long time they had this sort of design, and for me they've sort of lost it really. The modern ones, they just sort of have far too much data. You've now got LCD screens and sat-nav maps in the middle and telling you need to stop for a cup of coffee, and it's just unnecessary. And I just love the look of these. They're just clear. They're almost like World War II pilots instruments in their simplicity, and they just give you all the data you need to know. No messing about. Bosh, there you go, just what you want. The only thing I might add that is a bit unnecessary is this stupid miles per gallon indicator, which BMW produced for a while. It's meant to tell you how many miles to the gallon you're doing. In reality, it's complete rubbish, and it's just unnecessary. And another cool thing that they had, which was ahead of its time really, but looks a bit pathetic now, you'll notice these lights of here. Now, this car is actually due a service, so it says inspection, but these 4 green lights light up and they drop down and tell you when the car's next due a service. That might not seem that great today, but when these cars first came out, sort of in 1976 onwards, that was quite groundbreaking stuff. As you can see, very traditional sort of BMW really of the 80s, very driver focused, which BMWs were more than a lot of the other German makes, certainly more than Mercedes. You'll see the way the dashboard curves around the driver. As I say, very much a driver focused car, the 6 Series, rather than obviously pleasant for passengers, but as I say, you certainly know who's boss in one of these. Check out the way the doors shut as well. You just don't get this on modern cars. You'll notice the pillarless windows, so you've just got glass all the way around the top. Again, a bit like the Mercedes 126 I reviewed, really, really over-engineered door locks, again, that you just don't get on the modern stuff. And a lovely sort of echo as you shut the door. My review wouldn't be complete without a little engine start, so... Standard 6-cylinder hum, very much a BMW sound this, of a certain era. As you can see, even after 30 years, this one still runs really, really well. And it's quiet on the move, but actually, compared to a modern car, it's still got a bit of a burble. And before I go, I'd just like to obviously discuss some of the things to look for if you're looking at buying a 6 Series, because they're no longer cheap, and if you do stumble across a cheap one, it's certainly not going to work out a cheap car in the long run, because these are horrendous money to put right. You will need to sort of remortgage your house if you want to rebuild one of these from start to finish. They are just not a cheap car to put right in any way, shape or form. I've been lucky enough to own this one, which is a really good example, and it's even, it's never needed a huge amount of spending on it, but as I say, they are money pits of the first degree. The main thing, in my opinion, of course, which for what it's worth, is probably the chassis and the body shell. That's probably the most expensive thing to put right, and they do rust. They rust everywhere. They rust horrendously. So you want to be checking underneath. You want to be checking all the jacking points. You certainly want to be checking the wings. Now, these wings are approximately £500 if you can still get hold of them. Brand new, and that's before fitting. And you've also got inner wings on the inside, which you can check when you open the bonnet. They rust too. The sills rust, the rear wheel arches rust, around the windows, the windscreen and the rear window, they rust too, and the sunroof. And the nose cone is also horrendously expensive. You kind of get my point. They are just very, very pricey to put right. And to be honest, if you get a solid one that's rot free but has a blown engine, that will be cheaper, because mechanically they're pretty simple. So first priority if you're buying one is to, sorry, I should have moved the wheel in the background. The first priority if you're buying one of these is to buy a sound car bodywork wise. And the second thing is probably find one that's sound in terms of all the chrome and the trim, because again, expensive stuff. These I had replaced because the rubber had perished along the bottom and they were hard to get hold of, but I still think they were about £200 each, and there was 4 of those, and that's just the lower half. So I spent nearly £1,000 just on those. So yes, pricey. Other things to look for, as I say, engines and gearboxes are pretty good. Gearboxes in particular, especially the automatics, don't really give any trouble, obviously, as long as you change the fluid on time. Engine-wise, the M6s, M635s, they suffer from timing chain. Well, they don't suffer. it's sort of almost a maintenance item, but about the 100,000 mile mark they will need the timing chains replaced, which again is not a cheap job. You don't tend to have that problem with the normal 6 Series. This one's done 70,000 miles nearly and is absolutely fine. So yeah, engines and gearboxes, you know, suspension even, is all pretty off-the-shelf BMW stuff from the 80s and still widely available at sensible money. So that's the E24 6 Series pretty much covered. Unfortunately I can't drive it today because we're still in lockdown over here in the UK. Sadly, I would love to drive this and show you what it can do. Not the quickest car by modern standards. 0 to 60 on the normal 635 is about 7.5 seconds, which is pretty pedestrian really by modern standards. But I have to say, driving it, you put your foot down, and so the mid-range grunt is actually still pretty good. It, you know, it will keep up with a lot of fairly quick modern stuff, no problem. Top speed is just about 140 miles an hour. Obviously the M6s were a bit quicker. I think they were about 6 seconds or just over to 60, and they give a different driving experience really. The standard 635, particularly with the auto box like this one, is a lot more of a GT car. Like I say, this is a car for long distances. It's for your important board meetings, from going from Munich to Stuttgart, and yeah, it's a sort of feel-good car really. As I say, every time I drive it, I've had this car a long time now. This is the only car I'm never ever going to sell. I'm gonna hopefully in time pass this down to one of my sons, and they can hopefully enjoy it too, if we're not all banned from keeping any vehicles for enjoyment by that point, and we're all in Teslas limited to 20 miles an hour. But hopefully not. Hopefully things won't get that bad. So I'll conclude my review with a little drive around my driveway. So you obviously got power steering at this age. It's still quite a light car to drive, and yeah, they just drive really nicely. Like I say, quiet. It's not overly noisy. Refined. There's not too much wind noise on these either. You've got the nice sort of straight 6 BMW hum, which anyone who's had a sort of BMW from the 80s will probably know about. And yeah, they just really, in my opinion, a good car. I wouldn't say they're underrated, because a lot of people obviously now, you know, they are quite a thing, and the number of people who sort of stop and want to have a chat with me when I'm at a fuel station sort of says it all really. So that's the E24 6 Series. Thanks for watching, and see me next time on Real World Rides. Goodbye.